Hey there guys, so I want to welcome you back to another video as always. So for today, I'm going to be going over a topic that I feel is, excuse me guys, I'm still recovering. But I'm going to be going over a topic that I feel like is going to be relevant in a lot of ways. And it's something that I've been kind of thinking about over these past few weeks and just pondering. Another thing too that I want to mention before I do get started is I do again really appreciate you guys and your support on everything that I've shared, especially last week as I went to West Hollywood Pride. Now in this coming week, I plan on going to Nashville Pride here in Tennessee. So that'll be another thing that I'll likely share. Hopefully I can get a decent amount of pictures because it's only going to be one day that they do theirs. But I'm going to be going to that as well, so I did want to mention that in advance also. But I am really, I've been doing really well here recently. I've been staying busy. Now it's kind of been a challenging week with my business because of just so many different things it seemed like has gone wrong this past week. But overall, I feel like I've kind of overcome them, and I'm pretty proud of myself for not letting all of the setbacks get to my head. I've just kind of been pushing through, which, normally I wouldn't do that. In the past, I would break down, honestly. But I feel like I've grown stronger mentally. I guess because I've made it through so many different things, it's getting to a point to where whenever something does happen, I'm just like, okay, let's just push through. Eventually it'll recover. Eventually everything will kind of level out and it'll get back to normal. But I just wanted to share that with you guys. Again, I really do appreciate all the support. And again, going back to, of course, the topic at hand, what we're going to be discussing today is over masculinity and what really is the definition of masculinity. How do we really define it? And this is something that, I kind of grew up having sort of this back and forth with because I'm kind of a guy, of course, that's, has a more masculine look, of course, but throughout my entire journey of being a gay man, I've really had this mix of both the masculine and feminine side of myself. And if you look at older pictures, I was very much, in tune with a lot of the feminine sides of myself. And I think it's important to embrace both of those sides. I think as individuals, we're naturally just, we don't fall in a particular excuse me, we don't fall in a particular place. That's why everything is more of a spectrum, or everybody has different sort of, I guess you would say, not multiple personalities, but different ways that we sort of interact and that we are able to be ourselves. There's certain ways where we really can be ourselves in certain environments. That's like one thing that I've noticed a lot, and this is something that I discussed with of course, a lady who cuts my hair. And what I talked about, and we've always talked, she's been cutting my hair a while, she's pretty much a friend. But what I always talked about is, or what I was talking about here recently, is I was talking about what it's like when I'm around my parents versus what it's like when I'm around my friends, and how there's sort of this different dichotomy, how it seems like we have different personalities with how we act. Whereas, with my family, I feel like I have to filter things. I have to filter the way that I act. So generally, when I'm around my family, I act quote unquote more masculine than I would if I'm like out with friends. There's sort of this difference. I again, it's very odd, but that's the way the experience is, especially when you're a gay man. And maybe some gay men are more masculine in itself, and so it doesn't affect them. But with my personal experience, it's sort of been this back and forth where I've had to sort of switch or act in a different way when I'm around my parents. And then when I'm around my friends, I feel like I'm able to be a little bit more free. I'm able to speak openly and I'm able to just express myself a little bit more. And again, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And I don't think either that, like what I was speaking with her about, I don't think either that, you know, it it doesn't mean we have multiple personalities. It means it's we're having to separate every part of ourselves, if that makes sense. Where all of us have both this tendency to act a certain way, to, naturally when we're in an environment that we're comfortable with, we're able to act naturally. But see, like when you're out in public, especially like, being here in Tennessee, or if you're going different places and you're a gay man and you're generally, have a more feminine side to you, you do kind of have to alter the way that you act in a lot of ways. And a lot of that is not necessarily to, I wouldn't say it's necessarily to hide yourself, but it is a way to basically, like, kind of like a survival mechanism, is the way that I've usually heard it described, where we kind of have to make sure that we fit in with the environment so that we're not seen as an other, quote unquote. And so, I've had that experience multiple times. And I know people see me now and they're like, well, you have a very masculine look to you. But I've always had both of this mix. Like, if you look at all of my sort of pictures when I was, in my early 20s, there was a lot of feminine attributes that I had. And so it was more noticeable of being gay. So I was, called things on the street. And so that in itself, and like I just didn't care, and I've always kind of been that personality where there's no point, like, it's exhausting to try to hide things from people. So it just, at that time, I was just like, I just didn't care. And, I feel bad that, I put myself back into that situation where I had to hide everything. But I felt like a lot of the reasons why I sort of shifted my personality in a way is that it was because I was being around family again. I wasn't around friends. And so when I was moving back in with family, I felt like I had to alter a lot of things. And again, I know that sounds weird, but if you're somebody who kind of has that sort of, you know, personality where you have both this masculine and feminine, it's a little bit difficult because you have to, if you're around certain people, you have to kind of switch that around. And that's sad, but that's the society that we live in, especially when you're going into an area like, where I live currently, where you kind of have to really be cautious. It's just how it is because you don't know how people will see you. You don't know how they're going to react, and you don't know if they can harm you in any certain way. So, what I think is very just an interesting conversation to have is what exactly is masculinity? And even to that effect, what exactly is femininity? Because each of us as humans, both male and female, and anywhere else in between, we all have this ability to be fluid with how we act in a lot of ways. And I always would see, masculine is about being, really buff. It's about being really assertive. It's all of these different things. But really, is that what it is that what it means to be masculine, or is that what it means to be a man? And the same way can be said when you're talking about being feminine or femininity. Masculine is supposed to be seen as more dominant, whereas feminine is supposed to be seen as more submissive. But really, couldn't you be masculine and still be submissive? Couldn't you be feminine and still be dominant? There's just this dichotomy where humans are so, it's not a black and white issue. And this is something that I've mentioned many times before, is we are completely, we're not we're not put into a space, like we're not fitting exactly into a specific box under a specific label. All of us are very unique in a lot of ways. And that's like when you look at nature, like what I've mentioned with nature. Nature is not something where everything is clear cut, everything is as it seems. There's always all of these different sort of differences. Like when you look at flowers, there's so many different flowers, there's so many different trees, there's so many different variations of so many different things. Even though you have one tree, there's a whole collection of different types of trees. I know this is kind of like a weird analogy, I know, but what I'm trying to say is is that as humans, it's sort of the same thing where even though we are humans, and even though we live in a society that classifies us as we're supposed to act this certain way as being a male, we're supposed to act this certain way as being a female, there it's just not that clear cut. There's a whole spectrum. Humans act in so many different unique ways, and we react to things differently. Everybody, like, when I was growing up, I was always a shy. I wasn't fully considered the aggressive type as being a boy. I was never that was never my personality. So does that make me less of being a man because I was never aggressive when I was younger? I was always, hanging around girls, always connected with girls. I had friends that were guys, but generally had mostly my friends were girls. Does that make me less of a man, because that was kind of how I grew up? I mean, we all feel comfortable in certain ways, our what makes us feel ourselves is just, we're not in a box. We can't classify everyone in a box because we all have a natural tendency to act this way or that way or even in between. Like we have that tendency. So I just think there's not really a definition that you can define it, because both masculine and feminine, they're basically intertwined and they're interchangeable in a lot of ways. Whereas somebody may act pretty masculine most of the time, somebody may act pretty feminine most of the time, and then somebody may have a mix where their personality is sort of intertwined with both and that they embrace both of those sides of themselves. And so it's just a unique concept. I know that this is supposed to be talking about masculinity, but really, how do you define both of those different sides? How are they clearly defined when everybody is a spectrum in and of themselves with how they act? And I just think it's interesting. It's a very interesting concept because we're all so unique in a lot of ways. But that is a question that I've always asked, and it was something, especially for a man, you're always sort of having to fit into the bubble of masculinity, and that's what we're growing into, is that we're supposed to act this way. We're supposed to be the basically the top of the hierarchy, in other words. And you're not supposed to act submissive. You're not supposed to act like you're, under, like lesser. It's just, but can't you be a mix of those different things? Can't masculinity be a spectrum of different things versus just this clear cut sort of stereotypical way that we define it. I don't know. It's an interesting concept to think about, and I think it's something that I may that I may bring back more in the future because I just think it's very interesting to think about. I like what I mentioned before. I'm always interested in anything that involves human beings and themselves. Just the aspect of, psychology, how we act, the human body and health and wellness, which is why I do fitness and why taking care of yourself is important. There's just so many things that I've always been interested in. And I think these different concepts are so interesting in how do we define them? What do they mean to us? So that's pretty much all I wanted to discuss today, guys. I hope that this was interesting. And one thing I do want to take away from this that I want you to think about is do not let yourself be defined by your environment. Always focus on acting the way you want to act, who you are, and embracing that. And I know that it can be very difficult if you're in an environment where that is not, it can seem unsafe, but make sure that you don't try to just candy coat everything for everybody just to make them feel comfortable. What does it mean for them to feel comfortable? Why can't you feel comfortable? So, again, just think about that. And again, whatever trajectory you want to go towards or whatever feels natural to you as how you act that way. And that's the way that's what I think we should as humans. We're a spectrum, different ideas of different personalities, of different ways that we act and interact with each other. So again, just embrace every side of yourself and be yourself as much as possible in every situation. And of course, stay safe as always. But thank you guys once again for watching. I really hope that this was a little bit insightful and that this gave you a little bit of thought. But I will see you guys in another video next week. Hopefully, well, I don't know. I will be kind of doing things on Saturday, so I don't know if I'll have one exactly on Saturday, but I'll try to get a new video for you guys pretty soon. And I'm trying to get back into the rhythm. I know it's been kind of crazy because I was traveling, but I will get back into the rhythm of everything and get these videos more consistent. But thank you guys once again for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.